people, today I'm gonna make a video because I've seen a lot of people, in my modest opinion, talking too much shit about ITZY. Now, why would that trigger me, right? Because I find this very interesting and weird. I think this is a typical tweet you see, right? I'm gonna show them to you very quickly. I'll just do this. Sorry for my phone, but this is a typical tweet you see, right? How people tell you, let me do this so you can actually see my shitty ass face. Actually, no, you don't need to, because I'm actually gonna go back to my face immediately. They tell you, ITZY, 6 years ago, ITZY released ITZY, this is July 28th, and this dude is saying their fall-off needs to be studied. And again, if you can just look at the replies, whatever, they say, for example, this is a typical response, right? Let me just zoom it a little bit in. It's just that JYP didn't know what to do. They're pretty and had fans and hype. He ruined that for them. Not to mention, ITZY care more about ITZY colleagues than ITZY. It's whatever. ITZY domination, mostly the fact that they were the first 4th-gen girl group of a big 3 company. Is that even true? I think so, because I think they built in 2018, right? 2019, so that probably is true. They combined with the fact that Europe had no clear plan for them, made the downfall inevitable. The fall was they had competition, and this is a general belief. Now, mind you, I'm not the biggest fan of ITZY. In fact, I think if you look at ITZY, in my modest opinion, when they debuted, they weren't that good. They were trying too much to be like Twice, too much like being like any other girl group at that point that was very active. And while the songs were not bad, in my opinion, they didn't have particularly great quality. And I think if you look specifically, we can go directly to the Spotify, because I need to just look at Spotify. Right, the debut with 2019, the debut was Dala Dala, which was a decent song. I mean, again, it's not my personal cup of tea, but it's alright. Then they did IC, obviously was very popular, but IC, I'm sorry, but it's not a good song, but it was very popular. Again, it's 250 million, Dala Dala, IC 170. Then they have Not Shy, which is the really big hit. But this is during COVID, people are at home, more people are discovering K-pop, again, specifically through BTS and Blackpink. This one, BTS became extremely mainstream. And, they still are, but not as much as they were like 5 years ago. And, Not Shy was a huge track, right? It was kind of everywhere. I remember, pretty decent song. But what happened is that once they went, let's say in 2022, second part of 2021, but I'll say specifically, as we go in 2022, they decided to change the style, right? They had also In the Morning, which was big. Again, I don't like In the Morning. Like, again, this is an example where I feel like people talk for the sake of talking. I don't like this song, personally. Is it a bad song? No. But I don't like it, personally. But the fans loved that shit, no? The fans loved it for whatever reason. And as we keep going, they sing Japanese songs. Then they do Voltage, I thought this was a pretty decent song. They did Blah Blah Blah. They did Boys Like You, which I honestly think is a pretty good song, But this is a change of style, right? Where they're not doing the super hyper EDM stuff. They're doing some slower stuff, some experimentation with their production. They're still in that ballpark of a Twice type of production in general. I don't think necessarily that the company in question was necessarily trying to do anything extravagant, for example, historically, a company like SM has done historically, for example, or even smaller companies like I'm forgetting the name of it. I think Jellyfish with Very Very, for example, like this type of change where you kind of take that risk, I think it's Jellyfish, right? Because I think Vix is from Jellyfish. Doesn't even say, yeah, Jellyfish. So yeah, from there. So, but even Vix famously constantly changed their style, right? So let's go through just stats, because I think sometimes stats speak better more than just words, right? So ITZY is a group that's been around for 6 years, and they obviously had their highs and lows. Every group had. But if you look at their sales, this is obviously approximative. It obviously through Korean sales twt.blogspot.com. And this is their thing. I'm gonna show you right now. As you see here, Debut in Korea was 2019, in Japan was late 2021, or we can just say 2022, and the Korean sales are almost 7 million copies. As you can see here, 2019 new group. At the time, there were many other bigger groups at that point. If you think about it, you obviously had groups like BTS, Stray Kids, you had still EXO that was super popular, NCT was probably at their peak, and many others. So it was quite hard to really get big from the start. But immediately they go into 2020, they have a great 2020. And now, funny enough, this is where the fall off is supposed to start, no? So 2021 is a good year for them, where they have their biggest single, they almost sold 1 million records, and then they go into 2022. And they do great. They do 2.3 million sales. Again, I think if I check my Spotify, we can see what came out. As I said, in 2020 you had blah blah blah, you had Voltage, you had Boys Like You, you had Cheshire, which was pretty popular. For example, Cheshire is a song that, you know, I like quite a bit. A lot of people don't necessarily love, you know, because it was a different type of change of style. Then you had 2023. So they had a bunch of songs, but as you see, it's a different style. They're approaching with different styles of music. So now they're approaching it with a slower R&B track, a slower pop song, a more high-paced kind of like fun song, but they're changing their aesthetic, and the change, people like that. So they still retain the fans from the previous years, and they gain new fans through that. And so now they grow. Okay, they sell a shitload of albums. And again, it seems that at least in Korea people like their albums though. So this is a thing to consider as well. Then they go in 2023, they're still selling 1.3, you know, and this is where kind of everybody had their numbers going down outside of the usual suspect. And in 2023 they had obviously Cake, they had Ringo, which was very popular. Like this type of tracks, okay? Ringo, they had Bet on Me, Cake, None of My Business, Kill Shot. I really like a lot of these songs, and I think this is their first truly great EP, where I think they're doing great music, they're releasing quality projects, and they're separating themselves from the mass. But obviously that also causes of less interest, because for example, if we search on YouTube like ITZY Cake, it has 100 million views, which is honestly pretty fucking good if you consider if you consider the era. Was it 2023, 2022? 2023, yes, they had that. I mean, on the Bet on Me has 20 million. Kill Shot has I mean, this is the song, whatever, has 3 million, or the Showcase. Does None of My Business have I think None of My Business has a fucking... does it have a music video? Yes, None of My Business. So they're doing great, but again, this is an era where everybody numbers is going down. So the music videos are not popping as much as they were popping with, I think Wannabe has like a shitload of views on YouTube, right? It has 500 million views. I think ITZY has 270. Dalla Dalla has 300, but it was a different era of K-pop, where even if I look at Twice, and we know Twice is bigger than them, right? Their MVS 30 million views came out 3 months ago. I don't know, let me just, whatever, like Strategy, which Megan Thee Stallion doesn't even crack 100 million, but then What Is Love had almost 900 and it came out 7 years ago, /8. The Feels, which was really big, almost 500 million 3 years ago, and that was a really song that kind of went viral. Fancy went viral, but the point what I'm trying to say is that this is supposed to be, this is a top 5 group of the generation, right? So you can't, it's not fair to compare, but also they're seeing these numbers going down. You know, we look at a group like Enhypen, for example, which I like. I'm not the biggest fan of them, but I like the group, right? 30 million, but 2 years ago when they debuted, 160, 153 when they debuted, right? So they're not even cracking 100 anymore. Does this mean they're a failure? I wouldn't call them a failure, by the way. Best course, they're been single by far, but my point is, I wouldn't call them a failure, but numbers went out for everybody. The only group that is kind of doing these insane numbers is Baby Monster, objectively. And 114, 200. The performance video has 140 million. Dreep has 280, 200 for a performance video. Like, these are numbers. Sheesh has 360. Okay, like, these numbers are not numbers you see very often, right? And so they're having crazy success, but they're the exception. Let's take another group. Let's say Stray Kids. Okay, because maybe people say, oh, but it's not fair because you're picking specific groups. Let's use Stray Kids, for example. You know, Lose My Breath has 70 million. Chikijuma has 100 million. Megaverse has 100 million. Walking Water has 80. La La, which went semi-viral, 270. Maniac from 3 years ago, which was a huge song, 300. God's Menu, which is their biggest song, has 500 million. But it's from 5-6 years ago. Who else do we want to use? aespa, but aespa has never been like crazy success, crazy. But Supernova is 200, but they're consistent. Weight Plus 200, 149, 257. Like, probably they've kept it more consistent, but they've never hit those like 500, 600 million peak. So when you tell me that ITZY is unsuccessful, I need to see this number correlating. Okay, and so they're selling 1 million and something albums a year. They have a fan base. They have a huge brand, because their brand is super unique, and musically they sound very different from everybody else, which gives them, I think, much more longevity. Let's take a group like I don't know. Let's take ITZY, who's popping right now. How are their new YouTube numbers? Since we're using data here, we're not using. Do the Hands has 26 million. Tic Tac has 60. Magnetic, which is the debut, has 240, and that song went semi-viral on TikTok, Instagram, or whatever, right? So let's use ITZY as an example. That's right, ITZY sales. Okay. Second year, they're gonna hit 1 million again, probably. By the end of the year, if they drop again, that's very good. But why aren't they selling 1 billion copies? Okay, let's use Stray Kids. Stray Kids, which is one of the biggest successes, I think, economically in K-pop, correct? Right? Let's look at their numbers. They have, by the way, they have mental numbers, correct? Look for how many years they weren't selling great for their standards. So when they were selling here, ITZY was more successful. Then they did other stuff, which were also into more crossover stuff in the West, got more smart pushed in the more mainstream way, and they got big. 6, 12, 6. I mean, this year they're probably gonna be in the 2, 3, I assume, unless they drop another album. I don't know. Unless they drop an album, I don't know if they will, to be fair. But maybe they drop something. I mean, they drop 1 billion albums a year. You have to also think this specifically. How many albums they dropped last year? 3, 4. How many was it? 1, 2, 2. But they're full-length albums, all of their mini albums. Oh, it's only 2. I feel like they dropped more than this. I mean, maybe in the past they dropped more, but they've always been a group that dropped a lot of projects, right? And so 612 is crazy numbers. Let's go look at 17, for example. Okay, 17 sales, right? And they are, again, these are the highest group in the world, right? For years they weren't doing great, and then they had the, obviously, an insane growth. Obviously, as we have to say it for the billionth time, K-pop today is a bigger market for male groups, since 90+% of the audience is female, and the vast majority of women like men. So this is the situation. So if we get to Twice, for example, Twice is around 1.82 million, right? If you're gonna look at who else, like, I mean, I don't even know if New Jeans has the sales on here. Like, New Jeans was around 4 million, 3 million, right? So they were having really big numbers, but these are like massive groups. And it's not that they're successful, they're killing the market internationally. You can't say that ITZY is failing because they're not selling as much as 17 or Stray Kids, because nobody is. No female group is. I don't even think Blackpink has those sales. Pretty sure I checked. I don't think they even get those sales. Like, I mean, they have 6 million in Korea, which unfortunately it's not like, doesn't show you, okay? And I think, oh, you just can go here. 500, 800, 300, 1.7, 35, 3 million, which was a really big one. And then the last one they dropped was here. But they're doing great. like, who gives a fuck? I mean, they're just a solo artist. I'm pretty sure if I go on their Spotify, like their songs are huge. I mean, they have 20 million. How many listeners they have monthly? 30 million. So Jump, for example, has 150 million, just came out. The Girls, which came out a couple of years ago, has 140 million. Pink Venom had 800, but it came out in 2022, right? And then obviously you go back to like their classic singles, but even there, they've had a drop, and they're Blackpink. So what I'm trying to explain is that the narrative is dangerous, and I think it sets a precedent, like in this case with this group, where we're saying they fell off when they're doing well, just to push the narrative. And people used to do this with Red Velvet when they released Psycho and they didn't do the exact same song after that. Remember what happened with Momoland, right? They do their very super popular song, Boom Boom I think it was called, and then the company tried to remake that song 7 times in a row. Like, companies have made this mistake. I think in every company you need the consistent group in terms of success that also in musically pushes the boundaries a little bit. And I think companies like YG would benefit from artists like this, and not everybody sounding the same. I think even companies like Hype would benefit from them pushing more groups like Boys Next Door, or is it Boys Next Door? The group of Zico, I never forget the way they're called, but that group is fantastic. Obviously, when they had New Jeans, instead of fucking it up, now it like push these variables, and then you have your N-Hypens, you have your Seraphims that are just there to sell and to just look good, but you need those. And I think JYP has done a great job to not make everybody do the same mistake, and having consistently quality projects from your female groups, I personally think is very important. And I think it's such a in my modest opinion, such a misunderstood aspect of being in this industry. And I think that if I look specifically in the case of ITZY, but I mean, I'm a fan of FX. I grew up being a fan of FX and being told how FX was irrelevant. You know, I think about myself, for example, when it comes to a group like Red Velvet, which is my favorite group. Red Velvet never had crazy sales. You know, Red Velvet has always been around like the million, probably much less, honestly. Let's see, they've been on the 150, but these EPs like 100, 200, 200, 200, 400, 400. Then they had Feel My Rhythm, which was really big, 700. Oh, here 1 million, 600k, 300,000, you know. And their more recent stuff, for example, I mean, this is their Japanese stuff. The most recent album, Cosmic, did 300k. They don't need to sell millions. They've never did. Of course, they never cracked even 1 million. But then you have groups like, I think we've seen 17 before, but I just want to check very quickly because then a risk of forgetting, obviously, is, by the way, they sold 44 million records. That's crazy, by the way. But if I go and I see, on the get-go, they sold 200k on the first EP. 300, 260, 460, 500,000, 7. Their first million album came in an Ode, by the way, fantastic project, one of their best probably ever, if not their best objectively. Came in 2019 and it sold 1.7 million. Okay, first week did 700k, first one did a bit, whatever. Then they did 2 million with Hangare, coming a year later, but this is 2020, they're doing the same numbers. 1.2, 1.7. Attacca did 3 million. 3 million. Face the Sun did 5 million. Like, FML, which I don't like personally, did 6.4. 17th Heaven did 6 million. Like, most groups don't do these numbers. And again, good for groups like Stray Kids and these groups for like doing so well. But like for every Ordinary that does 2 million for them, Maxine did 3.7, by the way. 5 Star did, which was their biggest album, made 5.2, and Rockstar that came out the same year did 4.3. And the Last Swamps did 5 million last year. But if I look at Les Seraphim, they're pretty popular, or am I wrong? You know, but if I go look at Les Seraphim, I say, let's look at Les Seraphim. They're going down in terms of numbers. Their highest numbers were Unforgiven 1.5, the Easy 1.1, Crazy 800k, Hot 700. Are they a failure? I wouldn't call them a failure. But I also understand, and this is an important thing to explain to fans, that as long as the numbers are not drastically shit, objectively, who gives a fuck? I'm gonna be honest. Who cares? Actually, no, they went through the million. Yes, I see here. Like, Checkmate sold 1 million, Shadi 1 million, so I was correct. 1 million, and now they're doing 500k. So, to explain to you the ignorance, right? So, Gold did 700k, came out last year. 2 years ago, my bad. And it's last year. And this year, Girls Will Be Girls, fantastic mini album, will definitely be my list of the best albums of this year so far. For now, did 500,000. How can you not call this a success? Like in Italy, they would kill if you could sell 500,000 albums a year. A lot of artists can't even sell 100k, or just like with real physical sales, which is what K-pop does very well. I think people, I always forget about ITZY, for example. I think ITZY is something we always have to check, because ITZY is an example of, you look at 10 million, like 10 million is pretty fucking good, no? It is. And they are Mr. Consistency, right? Their numbers also went down this year. Are they a failure? They used to do 2.1 and now they do 1.4. But it's normal. The interest for the genre is less. In general, a lot of people grow out of that phase, and girls just want to see boys dance and not girls as much. And this is another thing people have to consider, that regardless of how you feel about certain things, you cannot, in my modest opinion, you cannot do the mistake of thinking that sales are the end all be all, or the so-called fame is not there anymore because all of a sudden you're not selling 8 million albums like 17 did. It's just not realistic. And 17 is very popular in Korea, and their main audience is in Korea, right? They don't necessarily try as much as they did in 2019 to do that crossover stuff. And yet, or 2016, my bad, 2016, 2017. And yet they're more successful now, appealing more to a Korean audience and an Eastern audience than they were like 5-6 years ago when they weren't as much doing that. So it's an interesting thing, and I think IVE has found their niche. Every generation has their IVE, their aespas, their FXs, their Red Velvet, their 21. 21 had a couple of huge songs, but 21 was never as popular as fucking SNSD, for example. Like, I don't even know if you can find their sales, because I think a lot of it's just not there, right? It says 3 million, but there's no way. They definitely sold more, right? But like 21 was never as popular. Is 21 a failure? I wouldn't say so personally. I think you would be pressed to consider something like 21 a failure. And think about a group like 21, an historic group. Apparently, their biggest album is their first one. But nobody gives a fuck. This is an important thing. And if it's true that Crush, which is the height of their popularity, sold 70k, I'm pretty sure that to call a group today a failure because they're selling 500,000, it's ridiculous in my opinion. Not only I think it's ridiculous, I think, I see here is the most like, I think here this guy did it like on a blog in 2013, by the way. The numbers are crazy, by the way. If I look at the numbers, they're pretty fucking good. For that era, to sell like hundreds of thousands wasn't bad. No, so to me, my point is this: do not call group failures when they're successful, and understand that you can't always use the highest parameter to consider somebody who's better than 99% of the music industry in terms of sales a failure. That's all I'm saying.